land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
I don't know anything about it. Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to the 44th Right and Left Discussion Forum. The purpose of our discussion forum is to demonstrate that civil discourse is not only possible when discussing potentially contentious topics, but is essential to the discovery of common ground. Our topic today is campaign finance reform. Our panel today, beginning on my left, is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. On his left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and current member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left, joining us for the first time, is Sharon Gandee. Sharon is a retired English teacher from Wadsworth High School. Ron, I turn to you. The campaign finance laws have been modified 3 times since 1972 and once by the Supreme Court. But there's still a lot of discontent with the way the political campaigns are financed. Now, if you could just take out a magic wand and wave it around to make any kind of a change you want, what would it look like?
Well, I have a magic wand.
Good.
John, you referenced that to us to start our thinking as an article on Wikipedia about campaign finance reporting in the United States. And I looked at that. It was an excellent starting point. It did give a summary of all of the changes, starting with Andrew Jackson,
Yes.
where campaign finance reform was considered needed and some taking place, and culminating most recently with the work of the Supreme Court on Citizens United and a Speech Now, so-called decree that extended that a little bit. And there's some things wrong with that. In defense of Citizens United, it did address the concept of free speech, the First Amendment rights. And such organizations, one of which I'm a member, American Civil Liberties Union, has defended that on those grounds. In my opinion, where that went wrong was to define corporations as people with the same rights as people, and some problems with that. So, what would my magic wand consist of? I'm not sure that having applied this abracadabra business to it, that there would be any better off we were before. But there are a number of movements going on out there. First of all, I would try to have almost complete transparency, to know who's giving what and to whom. Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty important. Whether or not we limit the amounts that organizations and individuals can give, either federally or locally, is a question that needs to be considered. There are possibly some constitutionality issues in terms of free speech and limiting that. That's quite possible, and I'm going to accept that. So should we restrict the amounts given by corporations? I think probably, because since corporations are not people, they are aggregations of folks. Certainly if you have a group that wants to march downtown and protest something, those groups have free speech. Mm-hmm. But all those people in that group are of like mind. That's not necessarily true in the corporations. Mm-hmm. I was worked for a company in Connecticut that had a PAC, and I did not donate to it because the company and the officers of that company just didn't fit in with what I wanted. So I didn't donate. Fortunately, I had no penalty from that. Mm-hmm. Some places you do. Yeah. So one of the things that's out there, and there are even movements to get constitutional amendments for this, is public financing. Mm-hmm. of things. And I think that's something that really needs to be investigated. There's voting with dollars, in which people are given a certain fixed amount of money and allowed to put that in a certain way. This is public money. And there's some options, variations of that, or there might be some federal matching funds for that. There might be various other sorts of ways, and that sort of thing should be looked at. Mm-hmm. I think the most recent push for constitutional amendment comes out of the Occupy movement, the Occupy Wall Street and so on. Again, constitutional amendment is trying to promote public financing so mm-hmm. that the individual voter will have more of a feel mm-hmm. for that. So,
was that a product of the Occupy movement?
It's one of those.
Is
yes.
that right? I didn't know that they really
Yeah.
had any goals.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's one of them. It's evolved from that.
Yeah.
Evolved from that. And my magic wand is my finger. That pushes the ballot box. Now,
okay.
of course, until you take care of gerrymandering, other things like that, doesn't
matter what
effective
you
magic
put.
wand.
Yeah.
But that's the only one I think that we citizens really have, besides our voice and our the ability to pick up pen and paper or hit the keyboard and contact folks. So,
Brian, it's too bad that Ron didn't give you something to dig into here. But
I knew he was going to bring up gerrymandering somehow.
Right
I knew he'd work that in.
Yeah.
You know, I think Ron has some great ideas, and I think both sides need to get together on this and sort of have some, like one of those strategic arms treaties where everybody agrees to ratchet it down. You know, there are always issues. The McCain-Feingold campaign finance seem to have some pretty good ideas in it. But when you can't get both sides to agree, it's always easy to point the fingers at the other guy and the straw men that each side puts up as far as who's spending the most money. You know, the other side of the argument is you could insert union to the word corporation. The difference being is that Ron had a choice in the corporation that he worked for, that he didn't have to contribute to that PAC. But when a union collects dues and the members don't have a choice as to how those dues are spread around and what what parties that they go to and what issues they back, I think that's a big issue. You know, either side has their ugly underbelly when it comes to campaign finance.
it's interesting, Brian, that most of these things exempt unions from being out here.
Right.
And the power of the union movement.
Yeah, and I think everybody needs to be in, everybody has to put some skin in the game. And until both sides agree that there's an issue with it, you're probably not going to get any real campaign finance reform that will move the needle. And that's sad because I believe there is too much money spent. It limits people's ability to really, what happens to the local guy that wants to run for Congress or run for state senator? I don't know what the numbers are, but it's got to be into the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Millions.
Just for a state, a state race. I mean, a local, you run for a county commissioner spot, you're going to spend $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, and that limits the people that can participate. So I'm all for everybody getting together and agreeing that we need to ratchet this down, and everybody has to sacrifice part of their sacred cow to get this done, because I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of money that's spent on elections. It's just
it is.
It's just
This
unheard
last
of.
time was horrible.
Yeah.
Patty, where are you coming from on this?
Well, first I want to say something about the unions just from my
I
own.
knew you would.
Well, it's just from my own experience. And Brian made the comment that union members are forced to pay for political projects which they may not agree with. That was not the case and is not the case with the teachers union. You do pay your dues, but if you do not agree with the political stance that they are taking, you file a form and you get back that portion of your dues that is used for political contributions.
That's good.
So you're not, and that's always been that way, so you're not forced to.
That's not very common among unions, though, is it?
I really have no experience with other unions. I just have my own experience with the teachers union to speak about. As far as campaign finance reform, obviously something needs to be done. Most of the reform that we have seen has affected primarily hard money. That is those straight donations, which originally set up, $1,000 for an individual, and I think it was $5,000 for a corporation. The problem comes with that soft money that comes from PACs and now the super PACs. And the concern I have with the way it's being done, number one, is the fact that there's no accountability. If you donate, if you're part of a super PAC, there's no transparency as far as who is actually making the donation. So while it may be XYZ Corporation or Mr. John Doe, you have no idea that they are the ones that are funding this project. And I think and especially because of the cost of the elections, when you have someone that is putting that much money into a campaign, And like you said, this can run into hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. Those people expect something in return for making a donation of that type. Case in point, if you look at our legislators, on the national level, an overwhelming majority end up being lobbyists for those companies that have been donating to them for years. There are those that say we have to increase the amounts because the limits are too small right now, and they lend themselves to problems. And you allow for inflation, and I would agree with that. $1,000 50 years ago is probably not enough. But the problem, it still is a matter of, if you're running for office, number one, you've got to be wealthy. If you can't, or you must have really good connections. Then you have to make sure that you have a super PAC that can actually print anything they want, which you technically have no involvement with, but that's not the case. And they can say anything they want, and it doesn't even have to be truthful. I think maybe a better route to go is, I think in Great Britain, they allow electioneering and campaigning for just a month. And that's it. I mean, we're starting, if you're running for Congress, you get elected, and the next day that you're running. If you limit it to that 1 month, it could drive down the cost. It could maybe allow for some of this, what's the word I'm looking for? Not crime, but
Mischief.
corruption, thank you. Corruption that is going on presently. So we need a better system.
Okay. Sharon, you're the rookie on the panel, so we'll let you weigh in.
You gave me a magic wand, and I'm going to use that magic wand. First of all, I'd like to go back to a couple of things. I read the same article that Ron read, and in the Citizens United, one of the Supreme Court justices said that the expenditures do not give rise to corruption or the appearance of corruption. And I thought that was the most naive statement I have ever read, to think that money is not a corrupting influence. I think all money needs to be removed from elections. We need federally financed elections. Each group gets the same amount of money. But I want to go a great deal further than that. I want to eliminate all television advertising. Now that, of course, will irritate the advertising industry, but all of that needs to be removed. Everyone is tired of the television ads. They certainly do not educate the electorate. If anything, they corrupt the electorate. We have half-truths and no truths, and I believe an Ohio court judgment almost gave consideration to the fact that one could lie in an ad, and it was up to the other party to set that lie correct. So advertising must go. The airwaves, I think, are very important, and I think the television stations, the national media, local media, needs to give equal time to all candidates. Whether that's paid for out of public monies or not is up to whomever crafts this bill. Where you have the two individuals who are running sitting side by side, and a panel discussion such as we have, where you really get to see what the issues are and you get to learn about the candidates. You don't get these mini spots on them that do not educate the voters. We had the lowest turnout in this election, I think I read, since the 1930s. That's almost a century ago. That less people voted today or recently than has done so in 80 years.
I think the number was 32% of registered voters nationwide.
Yeah, and so what are we getting for all of this money? As Patty says, you don't donate money without, especially large sums of money. The corporation money You don't donate that without wanting something. And a corporation's job and goal is to make money. It is not to promote the greater good of society. And so we need to get back to promoting the greater good of society, not the greater good of somebody who's running an oil industry or somebody who's running a gambling industry or whatever the industry, a gun industry, whatever the industry is that you're promoting.
Would that apply also to environmental groups, that you would leave them out of the equation, not let them support candidates?
I want all of the money out of it. That the money goes, that you have a federally financed and each party gets the same amount of money. You can promote your candidate by going out and speaking for him. Certainly that. You can have forums, whatever, but it should be to educate the voters, not to sway the voters.
How would you, I'll leave this open to anyone, how would you allow what we refer to as special interest groups? The special interest group is usually one that you don't like. But when you're talking about corporations, unions, and environmental groups,
NRA.
You know, all sorts of organizations like that, how do they protect themselves from a hostile government? I mean, I'm thinking in terms of
would you define a hostile
Yeah, that was-
government?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
I would.
My government's never been my enemy.
I think that it has been to, there are, let's say, a lot of people in government that are hostile toward corporations. In fact, they just don't like capitalism. And I would be concerned that if corporations were not treated like people, and they are, by the way, they are treated like people. You can sue them, tax them, regulate them, do all sorts of things like you can to
Except they can't
people.
vote or hold office.
You can't.
No, they can't. But I think that, that deciding, you know, what the definition of a corporation, you know, it's a legal entity under the law, just like a human being is. We're all a legal entity. And that if we're not able, if a corporation is not able to make campaign contributions to people who are favorable to capitalism and to corporations and understand the necessity of corporate profits, how it finances everybody's pension fund and all that, I can see a large group of anti-capitalist legislators just wreaking havoc on corporate America.
The individual can go out from that corporation. They can go out and they can campaign for that, the candidate that would be favorable to them. If you don't have this, you're leaving it in the hands of the voters who gets voted. If you don't do, as Sharon said, and take away that money from that corporation, you're allowing money to buy the government, and with no respect whatsoever to what the voters actually want.
A democracy is supposed to be an organization of individuals and of people. It's run by the people. We're moving towards an oligarchy or a plutocracy where money talks, and we've seen that in so many other countries. I don't think that, I think it's an overstatement to suggest that people want to get rid of corporations. We need corporations. Right. They employ individuals. And if a corporation has a point they want to make, they can still lobby their legislator. They can talk to their legislator, but I don't think they should have undue access to legislators. I call up my legislative office and I get somebody taking down notes, etc. I certainly never get to speak to the individual I'm calling. I'm quite sure that's not true if I'm $1 million contributor.
Yeah. Well, forget about the corporation for just a moment and think about environmental groups. And if they did not have influence over who was in the legislature, where would we be with environmental laws? Would we even have any?
Well, that's a lobbying effort, isn't it, John? Environmental group is a lobby, basically, and they have they try to wield that same kind of influence. If they are lobbying by slipping a little money under the table, expecting a little quid pro quo, that's a little bit shadier morally and ethically than just a straight attempting to preach the good sermon to the
and
committee.
this all sounds well and good in a utopian world, but the fact is it costs money to get your message out. It's not free. You know, it's great to be able to pick up the phone and talk to the local congressman's office, but if you really want to move an issue, you have to put money behind it. And that goes for, it goes for environmentalists, it goes for the NRA, it goes for the unions, the SEIU, it goes for the AFL-CIO. It's great to hear that the teachers can check a box if they don't agree with a particular candidate. Maybe they could expand and say, I'd like my money to go to Republicans, or I'd like my money to go to Democrats, or, you know, instead of just opting out, have a choice as to where that money goes. And I'm all for, you know, some sort of ratcheting down of the dollars that are spent. And the more and more people try, the more and more issues come up, because neither side wants to see it happen the way the other side wants to. And it's great to be able to say, oh, let's the federal government spend the money. But when you have, you know, we've reached a point where, you know, the folks in the SEIU and that represent all the federal government workers, they're not going to vote for someone that wants to reduce the size of government. Their issue, their lobby, their special interest is to see government grow. And so we've reached this point where both sides need to get together and say, you know, we've got to agree that we need to start really addressing campaign finance reform, not just with words, but actual dollars. And both, all the interest groups, no matter who you represent, no matter how worthy and how great you think your special problem or interest is, they need to come to the table and say, we're not going to, you know, we're not going to do it. We're going to accept the limits.
You know, you mentioned public funding. I was just wondering, where is the money coming from? That's a lot of money. Would you have? You'd have to have limitations on it. You mentioned the program, Sharon. You mentioned it.
Well, let's get some of the corporations to pay their fair share.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I just wondered how that. I mean, I've seen that suggestion. I just haven't seen it extended. I'm going to ignore it.
I thought we were going to talk about campaign finance reform, but Ron keeps throwing these bombs about corporations and gerrymandering. We need to have a potpourri where Ron can just lay it on and we can argue point to point. But I'm sorry, Patty, go ahead.
Well, that was my point. I don't know where the money is coming from, and I haven't seen it taken far enough yet. I mean, I like
What
the
money
idea
are you
of public
talking
funding.
about?
Pardon?
Are you
For
talking
public
about
financing?
Campaign.
Yeah.
You don't know where it's
finance.
coming from?
The public funding, you know, Ron had mentioned a program that should
Oh,
be.
you don't know where it would come
The
from.
money
if
would
we
come
did it.
from to supply the candidates with their public funding. And
It would come from the top 20% of earners in the country, where all the other money comes from.
top 20%.
Yeah.
Maybe they instead of
Well,
just donating
that's
$1,
okay. That's
maybe you could
okay.
donate $25 instead of saying, "Oh, it won't reduce your refund." You know, put it on there and say,
Yeah,
you know,
I couldn't find anything.
I would
any-
like to donate $25 to the federal election campaign thing, you know, and
that's all they can use.
and
As-
everybody
as-
agrees.
Sharon was
As we
screaming
do
at
with
the
the
bit, yeah.
resource in the state, you know, we do have an option to give part of our return if we're lucky enough to get a return.
$1.
But for various things, for a number of things.
It's
So-
a matching funds. I don't know how much that amounts to.
Yeah, that's
I know that it kind of, in 2008, it was put on the back burner.
I saw a number that if everyone were given $20, that would raise something like $6 billion, and the whole election cost only $4 at that time. So it'd be an ample source of funds coming out of that. Of course,
cover the
coming out of Uncle
presidential
Sugar
election,
means the rest of
probably.
us.
Yeah.
But you also need to
Yeah.
control how some of that money is spent. The money should be spent on getting a real message across. I object, and I think the ads have been a turn off to the voters. They're hateful.
Oh, they're horrible.
They prey upon fears.
untruthful.
they do not, they certainly do not promote a democracy. And I think our democracy is in danger.
Oh, I definitely do too. I think that we have
If
probably
we could stop the
gone 1 mile
robocalls,
too far.
I'd agree with that.
Okay.
I don't
My
get-
phone rings off the hook.
You would think that
But you don't have to.
the telephone companies that own the landlines, that they would be a big supporter of that, because people are dropping their landlines right and left.
They're going through on
and-
cell
and-
phones now, though, too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
let my answering machine answer the phone the month or so before elections.
But anyway, when
Whatever.
you think back to it's a big argument when people bring this subject up, that corporations are regarded as people. But you can go down a long list of reasons or aspects of where corporations are treated like people. And that, it's a pretty good argument if you don't think the corporation's a person, don't treat it like one. And that you can, they can do all, they can be sued and they can sue and they can behave like a person all the time. But it's almost like the argument about where life begins. It's an emotional, opinion-based thing that has no way to iron it out with facts and logic. Yes, a corporation is a legal person under the law. It has been since before the Revolution, and that's a cold hard fact. And but
I agree with this.
there are an awful lot of people though to support the idea of having some kind of national financing, federal financing of campaigns, and it's probably a good idea. I got a note from Tom Finley. He gave some opinions, and he said one of the things we need to do is to outlaw negative campaigning. Boy, would you want to patrol that one? How in the world? I mean, you're going to decide what's negative and what. And normally, we vote for the person that does it best. We all say we hate it, then vote for the one
do
who's
it,
most
yeah.
efficient at it. Well, thank you very much, folks. This was good. I hope you had fun, Sharon.
Better than I thought.
As usual, I'd like to close with a quote. This one from Andrew Tobias, who I mentioned a while ago, was a very wealthy campaign donor. And he said, "Nobody wants campaign finance reform more than I do. It would save me a fortune." And thank you very much, Andrew, for that. And thank you again, panel. Very good.